of the Issaquah School Board for September 10th, 2020. The first item on our agenda is a call to order in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you so much. So the first item on our agenda is public input, and this is the opportunity for the public to provide us input to the board on items that are not on the agenda for the evening. So I will ask if you have any public input, you would use the raise hand in the chat. To do that, you would scroll to the bottom of the Zoom where it says participants, click on that, and it should give you the ability to raise your hand. I see two people with their hands raised, and I am hopeful that this is about something that is not currently on the agenda. Again, we'll look for public input as we go through our agenda items. So the first person I see is Whitney Gardner. And we'll go ahead, and you're now unmuted and you should have your camera available. Ms. Gardner.
Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So my name is Whitney Gardner. I have 5 children who have gone through the Issaquah School District. One is already out of the school district. I have a daughter who graduated from Issaquah High School last year. I have a 10th grade son who is a sports only son this year, getting his schooling in another location. I have an 8th grader with Down syndrome at Issaquah Middle School, and I have a 6th grader who also started at Issaquah Middle School this year. I am really here specifically to talk about my 8th grade son, whose name is Diego. Diego has been in the Issaquah School District since he was 3 years old and part of the ECE program. He was at Challenger Elementary for his kindergarten through 5th grade and then transferred to Issaquah Middle School. We live in downtown Issaquah. I'm very concerned about my son. I am incredibly disappointed in the Issaquah School District and tired of hearing you talk about educational justice and equality. My son is a minority, and all of my children identify as being minorities. Their father is an immigrant from Mexico. My son is the group of people that you talk about who are the most vulnerable children. He spends 75% of his time in an LRC2 classroom. My son has not received a single minute of general education time since school ended in March of 2020. The only types of education he received during his CLP, continuing learning plan from March through June, were speech sessions that were 20 minutes 3 times a week, 2 sessions with his LRC teacher, which were 30 minutes each, and 1 occupational session. Those only were able to occur if there was a parent who facilitated him getting onto the Zoom platform, or if one of his siblings assisted him in getting onto the Zoom platform. Since school started last week, my son has received phone calls every single day from Issaquah Middle School indicating that he has not attended school. I have begged his IEP team to implement his IEP. I have a very demanding job, and I am supporting 5 children. Putting a kid through college, I do not have the ability to move him between Zoom platforms all day. Additionally, I do not understand why Issaquah is so far behind the curve in comparison to other school districts. Inglewood Junior High, which is 7.5 miles away from my house, is seeing LRC2 students on a daily basis. Islander Middle School, 10.5 miles away from my house, is seeing LRC2 students every single day. The other thing you need to be aware of is I called an IEP meeting plenty of time, and in the summer received extended school year time, which for any of you who have children who are special needs knows it's not something that's easy to get. The day before extended school year started, I received a phone call telling me that not a single teacher was available to teach my son's extended school year, and that they had asked 42 teachers to do so. However, did you know that neurotypical students who in the secondary program received in-person summer school services this summer? So now Issaquah this summer chose to choose neurotypical students to provide them in-person services, and you chose non-neurotypical students to completely exclude them. I'm tired of emails. I'm tired of planning meetings. I just want my kid to go to school. And you cannot rely upon parents to choose between financially supporting their families and taking care of basic needs and educating our children. And that is the exact predicament I have been placed in. I, at my IP meeting on Tuesday, asked the entire team for one solution that they have provided to me to get my kid to school, and they could not provide me one. I also asked for an out-of-district transfer so that my child could go to school. And Shireen Carver told me verbatim at that meeting that Issaquah could immediately implement my son's IEP. That didn't happen yesterday. That didn't happen today. And it can't happen tomorrow. So you need to be accountable to your most vulnerable students that you say you're concerned about the most, because those of us who have those students haven't received any type of support to get our kids back into the classroom.
Thank you for your input. I appreciate that. And I failed to mention that we have 3 minutes, but you were under the 3 minutes. So thank you for sharing. I have next Diana Goldberg.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, and we need your, there you go.
Okay, sorry, I'm on my iPad. So thank you. I appreciate you guys taking the time. I just have some concerns about what Issaquah's plan for evaluating getting our kids back into school is and what that looks like. I've heard from friends in other school districts that they have very, very clear plans laid out. And I'm extremely concerned because I have two Issaquah High School students, a freshman and a junior, who have both heard from multiple teachers that Issaquah High School will be remote for the remainder of the year, 100%. And having a junior who actually wants to go to college outside of the state of Washington, I find it's very concerning that he will be competing against students who are back in school now, who had a 2 to 3 month remote learning experience, if our plan is to be 4.5 months plus an entire school year. And so I am very much concerned with that, and very concerned with what that looks like, especially since our education is down to, at the high school level, a 4-day school. I haven't had, we're in the first 2 weeks, so I'm trying to be flexible and not freak out, but I haven't had one full day of both of my students being in classes for the full period. Not one. Both of my kids have been in and out of class, have had multiple classes that have lasted 10 minutes to maybe 1 or 2 lasting the full class period. So I'm very concerned with the quality of education we're getting at the upper level. It's definitely better than spring, I'll give you that, but it is certainly not what we experience with in-person school. It just can't be replaced with all of the technology. It just can't be. It's not the same thing. So I would really appreciate having a very detailed plan, whether it's the school board's evaluating it once a month, once every 3 weeks. This is what the numbers need to look like in King County for us to get back into the classrooms. But I feel like that conversation would be very helpful to parents who are panicking for whatever reasons, whether it's both everybody trying to work and having multiple children at different levels and trying to help them with their schoolwork. It's just, a lot without a clearly defined plan. So thank you.
Last, I have Alex Rosenstein.
Actually, I have my kids right here, and they wanted to say something.
Okay.
Introduce yourself.
Just give us your name.
I'm Allie Rosenstein. I'm Haley.
Hi there.
We just wanted to say that we think school is actually going really well online this year.
Great. And what about it is going well for you?
I feel like my teachers are really trying to help. And we did like a full week of just learning how to use it. So everyone knows how to do Canvas now. What about you? She makes us turn on the video.
And what was your favorite activity you had?
I'm not sure.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed your first week of school. And I hope you're doing really well in all your math and reading and writing and all the other subjects that you're learning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your public input. Great. And I did notice, Ryan, you had your hand up before. Do you still want to speak?
Yes, please. Sorry, I had we lost our connection on our laptop and our Wi-Fi was going out. So I did still want to speak.
Great. 3 minutes.
So we have, my wife and I have 4 kids in the Issaquah School District. We have one at PCMS, one at Challenger, who is our one that's in LRC2 there, who's having a lot of difficulty, and we have 2 kids at Grand Ridge. So our 3rd grader, his name is Teddy. He has been in Issaquah special education since preschool. He's been on an IEP since that time. He's in LRC2 at Challenger. And for him, this format is definitely just not working. He is just, he cannot facilitate his education on his own. He can't. Well, first we were given the wrong computer. He needed a laptop that was a touch screen and had a stylus. That's what he had last year. That worked decently. But we weren't given that. So we said, okay, we can get it replaced. But of course there's a time frame because everybody a lot of people need laptops. But that just a little more work for us to get that. Now we're getting it, but we're getting that laptop, but he just.
Oh, you muted yourself, Ryan.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so he's unable to navigate and get to these meetings on his own. It typically requires us to find the links to get on his meetings. The teachers, I understand, we've been in contact with them. They're absolutely doing their best in a difficult situation, but it's hard for us to navigate where he's supposed to be going at what time. He's supposed to be doing special groups at certain times, then he's gen ed, then he's bouncing back and forth. And we've missed a bunch of meetings just because we can't figure it out. And we can't figure it out. He cannot figure it out. I guess the point I'm getting to is we're not educators or therapists. We don't have any training in that. I work in a stressful career in law enforcement. I cannot work from home. I don't have the option to do that. My wife is also a government worker. And so we're struggling we have to be here to help him. He cannot do it on his own. A couple days we've tried to let him kind of go on his own and he has not done anything. He can't get on. He's very frustrated. He's doing PT, OT, social skills, speech. It's just too many places for him to navigate to. He doesn't understand what's happening. It doesn't work. He knows he's excited to go back to school because he knows what that means. But he's not getting any of his IEP goals addressed. He's had no education related to his IEP goals. I think I already said he doesn't understand. We also, like I said, requires us to be the teachers and therapists, and we are not trained in that. We don't know how to do it. And the online just doesn't work. It doesn't work for him. We also have a third grader at Grand Ridge. She actually is neurotypical. However, she is having difficulty as well. And online is not working for her. We have to spend a lot of time with her as well. And there's just isn't the ability for us to go back and forth between the two of them. And especially him. I mean, he just cannot do this. We have to sit by side with him to go through everything. If we leave him for a couple minutes and come back, he's gone off the meeting or he's done other things. Right. Yeah. And so this just is not working. He needs to be in person. I mean, I guess the big thing is just none of his IEP goals are being addressed. He's not learning anything. I mean, there's a couple things that we're doing on Seesaw, but it's not really anything that he's learning. It's just matching things and doing things like that. It's not actually addressing the things that are going to help him make progress. He is 60% gen ed and 40% LRC2. So our hope is that he can be integrated fully at some point, but without getting any education, that's obviously, that's not going to happen. So we would just obviously like to see, in person return as soon as possible. And we understand, we had heard this before, but I think Whitney mentioned it, that other districts have students who have returned already, protocols set up. Issaquah did programming over the summer and had safeguards set up. And it worked well. We know people that were helping facilitate that. They said it worked well. So we think that it could work now in a hybrid type scenario, especially in LRC, special education, where the students there are smaller numbers and 2 teachers. I think that's about all I had to say. Just that he's unable to do this on his own. He can't do it. He can't do it by himself without us assisting. We don't have the ability to do that. We have another child, 3rd grader, that we're trying to help. And we just need him back to school now, like as soon as possible.
Great.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Appreciate it.
With that, I don't see any other raised hands. So we will move on. We do appreciate public input. We know that sometimes it feels very one-sided because it is input and there's not output from the board, but we do listen. We take copious notes. So if we weren't looking directly at our cameras, it might be that we're typing down what you're saying, or we might be looking at you like my computer is, and I don't look like I'm looking at the camera. But thank you. Thank you for your input. The next item on our agenda is our approval of our consent agenda. The consent agenda is a meeting management tool that allows the board to approve a large group of basically standard work that were either required by law, where we're not going to have a conversation around it. The board has reviewed all the items on the consent agenda. At any time, a single board member can choose to pull an item off the agenda to put on the general regular agenda. So at this time, are there any items that anyone wants to pull from the consent agenda? Okay, so then I'll call for a motion.
I move the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Suzanne, could you repeat that? Because you're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda has been passed. The next item on the agenda is the establishment of the regular agenda. So this agenda has been posted at least 24 hours in advance. Superintendent Thiele, are there any changes to our regular agenda?
There are none.
Okay, great, thank you. So the first item on our regular agenda is the work study review. So the board met with some of our student reps and one of our activity coordinators from Liberty High School. Michelle Munson came to join us to talk about the student representatives to the board that usually get to join us for these conversations. So we talked about kind of what that role is, what we have had as student representatives in the past, and kind of some resetting and recalibrating of what it is we want from that and how we can best support them. So anyone else want to talk about our meeting with our students?
Marty, I thought
Go.
it was a good meeting, and I think it's maybe on us now to, I don't know, go off and form a little two-person committee to review the questions, maybe, or get input from the 5 people and somebody compile a set of new questions. I don't want to just leave it hanging, or are we going to talk about it more in retreat setting or something?
I do still have it on our retreat agenda that I have crafted and not given to Ron yet, in case he was wondering. I've put together a whole bunch of lists. And I think so Superintendent Thiele had taken a list of about 6 items. So I do think that the questions definitely fall in our seat. Also determining if and when we want to provide mentors to the different schools. That was a different idea that came up, which I really, really liked, because why not give you one more thing to do, by the way? And then it might be good, maybe a subcommittee of the board to go and put together, take a look at the questions. Although I liked Simone's idea of when we look at our main topic, which is usually the item number 2 or 3, to be able to say, are there questions that we might have related to this rather than a standard set of questions?
Or just offering the opportunity for public input, which is another thing we talked about.
Yeah. Anne.
So something to consider is the timing of all of this, because Suzanne and I are set to speak to the high school students in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're changing something, it could also be good to have something in place by then. I'm assuming the kids start coming at the beginning of October with the first school usually. Right, Donna? Yeah. So I wonder if, since Suzanne and I are going to talk to them in 2 weeks, if we'd be willing to write something up that says kind of this is with the mentoring, and something about the questions, whether we make some new or we allow students to come up with their questions. But maybe if Suzanne and I did that and brought it back or sent it out to everybody to get their feedback without having a meeting, so we have something to share with the kids in 2 weeks.
If you're willing to do that, that would be.
I would be willing to.
Sorry about that. So yeah, if you two want to volunteer for that, I have no problem with that at all.
Okay, so how about if we take a stab at that and send it out to everybody and then get a little bit of
Clearly, I think Stephen is trying to boot that individual out. We're being Zoom bombed here, obviously.
I am. It's a public person in the meeting. Apologize. It does take a second for when that happens in order for the mute to kick in, and then I report them to Zoom as well, so they'll get booted from the session.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Sorry for the disruption.
The fun of technology.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you guys are willing to do that, I think that would be really helpful. And then we can, you guys can take that information in with the kids. So what kind of time frame do you think you could have it done in about a week to just send out to the board to say, these are what we're going to say?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm around. Ann and I can get together.
So,
Or, communicate together.
Yeah, and Ron, you could share what you took down as notes with us as well to make sure we take into account the things you heard as we try to put this together, because I know we are doing this in a compressed time. I just think it would be really helpful to have this new direction before we start talking to the students.
Yeah.
I think that would be great, Ann. It'll be easy. I'll send you over my notes, and they're very specific. You know, they're, like I said, there were like 6 things that were really good suggestions. I thought you could choose to do.
You know, we're used to our board meetings going all night long. So if we have to mute everybody and just not continue them until we do that, I'm not concerned. I can put a pause on this meeting and call it quits right now. Miss Sydney, I think you had something to say.
Oh, I was saying, so the piece that I'm happy to work on is the, oh, we have someone starting screen sharing, is the sort of intro to the meeting. So whatever communication you might want to send out to students prior to joining the board meeting. So, you know, here's what it'll look and feel like, and here's what to be prepared for.
Yeah, normally when Ann and I go to the Interdistrict Student Council, we somebody provides a sample agenda for the meeting. We go into a little bit of history of what's the board, the fact that we're elected, how policy governance works, and just kind of all the nuts and bolts and what a meeting looks like and when it might be appropriate for kids to participate, and we try to encourage them to do that. But again, I took the point from our students that when a student comes in and hasn't met the 6 scary adults in the room, that might be more difficult than we make it sound. So, but we usually do try to give them the basic lay of the land. What's a board? Why does it meet? Why it has to meet in person? Da 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 da. So, if you've got anything that you think we should add to that, happy to take thoughts.
Oh, I was just thinking like right before they join, like when the couple of people are chosen, that we could send them a little welcome message so it's fresh.
Oh, okay.
At the time, like, hey, remember you had this detailed thing, but like a little welcome note right before they come in.
Okay, so I am so sorry for the disruptions. I do want to also say that we have finished the public input portion. So if we need to, we can resume this with a Zoom only and then offer viewing on the Issaquah School District YouTube so that public can be a part of the meeting without having access to the meeting. So that is what we will do if we have one more interruption. This would be a similar situation as if somebody came into our boardroom and started yelling or started showing their parts. We would have them removed immediately. So I have taken the opportunity to remove those people, and I will continue to do so with no warning. If you interrupt my meeting, I will be coming after removing you. In case there was anyone else who was interested in interrupting our meeting. The next item, are we done with this conversation? Do you guys have clear? Okay. The next item on the agenda is the first week of school review. So Superintendent Thiele, hopefully uninterrupted, you can share with us about our first week. You're muted. Do I need to unmute you? There, you can be unmuted now.
Thank you, President Moraldo. Members of the board, very interesting. We have completed 7 days of ISD Live, our remote start to the 2021 school year. My plan tonight was to kind of briefly go over some of the highlights, if you will, of the first 7 days of the school year. I'm then going to ask Assistant Superintendent Bongard and Deputy Superintendent Almy to share a little bit about what they've been hearing from the levels, elementary, middle, and high. And then at the end, I'll ask CFO Cooper to give us an enrollment update, which is always part of our kind of annual report out of the first week. So we completed, as I said, 7 days. And I just want to give a huge thank you to all of our teachers, the administrators, support staff, parents, other family members, neighbors, and most importantly, our students for doing all the hard work needed to make the launch of ISD Live remote teaching and learning, that system a success. And it does take all of the individuals I've mentioned above. And of course, there's been some hiccups and glitches along the way, much like we've experienced a few hiccups, if you will, in our board meeting here tonight, using the technology and so forth. But by and large, the feedback that we have received, and I know the board has received a lot of it too. Thank you to the public who's reached out to share some of their experiences with us. By and large, families and staff have been quite positive. And probably the most common thing I've heard is a big improvement over last spring. And again, I would remind people last spring is what I considered emergency learning. We were forced into it on a moment's notice, and there was lots that needed to be improved. When we solicited feedback from our community last spring, we had several issues that emerged with our remote teaching and learning. And they were too little or no virtual interactions or contacts, need for common learning management systems or LMCs at the secondary level, more direct teaching from teachers. And that was tied in at some level to the virtual as well. We heard our community and have delivered in all three of those areas. Now I want to pause here just for a moment, President Moraldo. I do not want to appear tone deaf to the public input that I heard tonight. I'm talking by and large about our general ed populations of students. I want our community members who took the time to share tonight to know that I heard them. I know my staff heard them. We are working really hard to try to get our LRC2 students in just as quickly as we can. That is our top priority that folks are working on right now. So again, I don't want to sound tone deaf. I recognize what those families are going through. And I'm very proud of our system and how well we have launched our remote learning, but I also recognize that is not working well for all students. I did want to note, though, that also as part of the ISD Live that was created, and for all the people that had a hand in that over the summer. The other aspect of it, I think that has been very helpful and we've gotten good feedback on, is the daily schedules. And daily schedules with options for those who need to be able to access their learning asynchronously as well. So that's another component of what we've been doing that has been much improved. What I've heard from folks is it feels much more like school. It's much more predictable. There's routine. The virtual interactions have been very positive and uplifting by and large for most students, because everybody's feeling a bit isolated out there in their homes and wherever they are, where they're zooming in. And this helps a little bit. I know it helps me when I can see all of you, and while we can't be together often personally, I do think this is an important aspect of it. So huge thanks to the staff for the work that they've done there. A few other highlights that have been happening, our kindergarten WA Kids conferences. And this year, the addition of our 1st through 5th grade family engagement conferences have been happening as well. Those have been quite a hit with many of our teachers and families. It's a way that we've been able, one of the things that we really miss with in-person instruction is our ability to establish and build relationships. And so I really appreciate that the staff realized we needed to try some new things in order to help facilitate the establishment of relationships. And those family engagement conferences have been a big help in that as well. There are a number of other important events that have been taking place while our virtual school has started. We've had lots of orientation activities. I spoke to some of those prior to our last board meeting, and some of them happened since that time as well. Orientations for students that are new to a school, whether that be the 6th graders in middle school or the freshmen, 9th grade classes at high school, or families who have just arrived into our school district, and getting them oriented to what's happening with the ISD. Virtual curriculum nights, those have kicked off and will be going for the next couple of weeks. So our virtual curriculum nights are happening. Materials distribution, and I wrote it down in my notes. I said physical materials distribution. I feel like I have to always qualify between virtual and the real world now, but materials distributions are occurring in buildings all across the district, and in a COVID-19 mitigated manner. So, everything we do, we have to think it through and how we're going to do it in a way that helps mitigate the spread of the virus, and I really appreciate the work there. You'll notice in some of the e-newses coming out from our secondary schools that virtual clubs are starting to form, and the club leaders are starting to plan and think how they will do this. And so we'll start to see virtual clubs happening, particularly at the secondary level here shortly. SEL lessons, we embedded intentionally a lot of social emotional learning at the beginning here, the first week or so of school, and that will continue through, but especially front loaded a fair amount of that. Really some great activities to help ease our students back into school and to support their mental health. Again, knowing we're coming out of this very unusual, or in this very unusual time right now, and that we wanted to have that opportunity to for our students to, be able to talk and think and participate in conversations related to social emotional learning and wellness. Tech distribution has been a big part when you become a remote school system. Making sure that everybody has technology is important, and so we have worked hard. It's been a major logistics challenge. We have distributed nearly 6,500 laptop computers at this time, and over 1,000 Wi-Fi hotspots. Getting closer to 1,100, I believe, on the Wi-Fi hotspots. Again, big thanks to our tech department, and our building staff for making this happen. Our tech department had a great plan for getting out the vast majority of these machines, but what happens when you get down to the really hard ones at the end, people that have language challenges, transportation challenges, hundreds of people who actually registered in our school system since the first day of school. And our buildings have been a big help in that, making sure that we can get technology in the hands of our students just as quickly as we can, because we recognize that's how they access their remote learning right now. So appreciate all the work that's gone on there and the good thinking that folks have brought to the table to try to solve some really puzzling challenges sometimes. I think we're down to the last 1 or 2% right now that we're working to get all of these final orders filled, and some changes and things like that. And our goal is to get the machines out there just as soon as we possibly can. I know people are working really hard on it. I know people were in over the Labor Day weekend contacting families and the like. So I think we're very, very close. We're very, very fortunate as a community that we have all of this technology and that we are so wired. And I can't talk about this without yet again thanking our community for their long history of supporting tech levies, so that we would have all of this technology that we could get out in the hands of our students. So thank you to the community for that. That has helped make this, the success of this launch happen. So really appreciate it. So those were the highlights that I wanted to touch on for the first 7 days, but I thought Assistant Principal Bongard, and I believe Stephen has to unmute us now, which is probably a good, we might want to just, he probably wants to mute me a lot more than he gets to. So, but Jody, if you would like to share a little bit, and then after that, Dr. Almy, if you would share a little bit too about your experiences the first week that we're here too.
Well, thank you, Superintendent Thiele. Jody Bongard, Assistant Superintendent, Elementary Education. And I have to say, Superintendent Thiele covered many of the highlights that I had planned to share, but I have to acknowledge also the work that's happened out in the buildings, from our admin teams to our office staffs, our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our custodians. They've just done a tremendous job with, like Ron mentioned, materials distribution, supporting our family engagement conferences, our WA Kids Family Connections, and the screenings that took place there. And I guess kind of the good news, bad news is we had the opportunity last year to put a process in place for the materials distribution. And while it was unfortunate we had to go through that, it did help us so that this year we could really streamline and have that process in place. And our schools have been doing a great job of carrying out that and making sure our students have the materials and curriculum supports that they need for this first trimester. So they've just done a terrific job of ensuring that. In talking to several principals, they had over 90% of families pick up those materials the past 2 weeks. And the families that haven't been able to, they've been calling one-on-one to arrange times that they can come in and get those materials. So I think they're working really hard to make sure our students have what they need. The other piece, we have to thank our parents and our students for persisting and persevering and learning the platforms, getting used to the new schedules. And I know for some families it's not perfect, and we're working with families to provide many opportunities and being very flexible so that students can attend asynchronously. Our principals and support staff have been reaching out the past 7 days to families that haven't engaged to find out what supports they need, whether it's technology that they may have registered after the EVP process to get computers, laptops in their hands, and also to make sure that they can get logged in and can start engaging in the learning. So I think, like I say, not that we wanted it to happen, but a lot of the learning and some of the processes we put in place to track students and engagement have helped us as we begin the year, because we know how to do that now, and it's already started early on, so students don't lose ground at the beginning first few weeks of school. A couple of the highlights are several principals said that they've been getting into classrooms and reading some of their favorite books to students, just like they would do in brick and mortar. And that's been a highlight of the last 7 days for them, getting to see students' faces and interact and make those connections with our students. So I think overall what I'm hearing from our principals, from some teachers, and from emails that I've been receiving is that we're off to a really good start. It's not perfect. We've had a few glitches here and there, but I think everybody's rising to the occasion. And what we learned last year, we've improved upon those processes, and it's definitely helped get our year off to a good start.
Thank you, Jody. Josh, what do you have to share?
Thank you, Superintendent Thiele. I would echo a lot of what Assistant Superintendent Bongard said, and Superintendent Thiele, you did cover a lot of great things that are happening at both the middle and the high school. Just to start with the middle schools, just really amazing attendance out of the gate. Synchronous attendance has been in the mid-90s in our middle schools each day. And one day, I believe it was Tuesday at Maywood Middle School, we only had 11 students out of almost 1,200 not in synchronous learning. That's over 99% of the students synchronously learning one day this week. So great attendance from students. And the first couple of days in middle school, teachers really focused on teaching the learning management system, How are we going to use Canvas? How does it work? How will we work through assignments and whatnot? And feedback that we've gotten from staff and from students and from a lot of parents too, is that really lowered the anxiety with a lot of our middle school students where this was very new to them. 2 days this week, our middle schools are doing supply handout where students and their families come in. They get their books and other key learning supplies. It's been very well attended. Today was the first day. Tomorrow is the second day. And again, appreciative to our building staffs who are able to do that seamlessly. As far as our high schools, again, synchronous attendance is very high, not quite as high as the middle school, but definitely very high. We've been surveying our students, and a couple of the things that we got from that, and I think that Superintendent Thiele talked about this a little bit, is that they have really appreciated the structure of the school day, and they've appreciated it from the perspective of it was different than the spring, but they like it a lot more. And they really enjoy seeing their teachers, seeing their friends, seeing their classmates on a regular basis. One piece of information that we did get, and it's not surprising from the surveys that we've done from the students though, is they do prefer in-person learning and brick and mortar learning and are looking forward to when they can do that. So that came through loud and clear as well. Textbook and supply checkout's been going on all week at our high schools. Thank you to those building staffs who are getting those supplies out to students as they come. Students don't, they come up to the front door, they don't go in the building, and those supplies for their schedule are quickly retrieved and brought to them. That's been working great at our schools. Also a shout out to the Issaquah Schools Foundation, who them along with our student interventions team was able to get all of the backpacks to students who need additional school supplies, and we're able to get those handed out at a supply checkout as well. I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to Carolyn Kennedy from the foundation. She worked so hard this summer. It was logistically, it was very different than a normal summer as far as how we got those backpacks together and where the pallets went and whatnot. And we had to get creative, but she got it done. And thank you to the ISF again for their ongoing generosity, especially for our students in need. One last piece from high school that I'm really excited to talk about is our freshman orientations, which happened right before school started. The participation, not only from our freshmen, but from our upperclassmen was overwhelming. We had roughly about between 85 and 90% of our freshmen who attended freshman orientation at our high schools. Even at Issaquah High School, we had over 140 upperclassmen take part in the virtual freshman orientation as well. And 85% of Gibson Egg High School, their upperclassmen took part, and only one freshman was not able to attend. So every single other freshman was able to attend orientation at Gibson Egg, which just tells me that our students are excited to come back, as excited as you can be for virtual education, but they came in numbers and represented, and thank you to the upperclassmen who helped us facilitate that as well. So a solid start at all of our secondary schools that we can build on as we move through the fall, and looking forward to being able to update the board and the community on more in 2 weeks, hopefully, as we continue.
Thank you, Josh and Jody. President Moraldo, before I asked Mr. Cooper to give the enrollment update, I also wanted to speak to something else. It's been a huge work project that's been happening behind the scenes. It's not typical of what I would report out on a first week of school, but given our unusual circumstances that we find ourselves in a worldwide pandemic and with remote learning, and given some of the input that the board and I have received, really back since March, but in the last few days, and it has to do with I want everybody to know, and I believe I can speak for the board here, that we share the opinion of our high school students in the survey. We too prefer brick and mortar education, and we want our kids back in school. I spoke to just a few moments ago about our self-contained LRC2 students. We desperately want those kids back in school. There's a lot of work that's happening to make that happen by the end of this month. It is a big lift. There's a lot of logistics that are involved in it, in terms of matching teachers and students, having the facilities be appropriately established, creating the bus routes that we need to have in place. But I guess, and I apologize for any lack of communication related to this, but I do want the board, I want our public to understand that is a goal of this system, of the Issaquah school system, and I believe, again, of this school board, and it's certainly my goal, and to continue to move forward and get kids in person. I believe in-person education is superior to remote, and I'm just thrilled that our teachers, our community has embraced our remote learning that we have to do right now. But we are working hard. And what do I mean by that? I mean, we are in discussions with our labor unions and with our Issaquah Education Association, and they've been a good collaborative partner in these conversations to do the planning and the preparation so that we can appropriately, with virus mitigation, bring these students in and bring them in for some in-person instruction. And it may look a little different depending on the grade and the types of students that we're talking about. But as the board said, when they approved the motion to start remotely, you echoed or you made a strong statement that you wanted us to start immediately looking at how we could bring students in. And we got some good news earlier this week from Seattle-King County Public Health. We are doing our work as a society to mitigate the spread of the virus. One of the critical numbers that we watch and is in the decision tree is how many cases per 100,000. And we hit an important landmark earlier this week. We dropped below 75 cases per 100,000, which puts us in the moderate category now, which opens more opportunities for students to come back in. In fact, that number is now at 65 per 100,000. And the other number that is another important number, the effective reproductive number. The goal was to have that number drop below 1, and it did this week. It's at 0.6. Those are very positive indications that would tell us that the virus is being kind of beat back somewhat in our community, which should help us be able to reassure people that they can come back into our schools. And I want to be clear, when I talk about students coming back, we're not talking about just flying the doors open and seeing 2,000 students in Issaquah High School or anything like that. I'm talking about those furthest away from educational justice, are those LRC2 students, as I've spoken to, kindergarten and first grade, those youngest learners, those students that are just learning to read. That's the next group we're working on. We will continue to do our planning behind the scenes to make that happen. I know I personally have a goal of getting those kids in the month of October. Hopefully by about mid-October, we would start seeing our first groups come in. We do need to have about 3 weeks in between groups so that we can monitor the impact of them coming back in. But I think it's doable. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I know that there will be some challenges with it, and it probably won't be as smooth as we would like at times, but it is something that I believe in and that my team believes in, and we will continue to have conversations with all of our labor groups about doing this and getting students back in person. And because I believe that the science tells us it's the right time to do it. It's the appropriate time to do it. Now, the one caution that public health is giving us, and I think it's smart to have these cautions, is that we just came out of a 3-day Labor Day weekend. And when coming out of Memorial Day and Independence Day this past summer, we saw spikes or increases in cases after that. I'm hopeful. I know that I've kind of pleaded with our community to practice good mitigation strategies. I harp on it with my friends and family and everybody when they get tired of hearing me say, put your mask on and keep your distance and all of that. I just remind them, we want to get our kids back in school, and that's how we'll do it. So I'm rather optimistic about that. We need to, I hear the message, we need to communicate that better. I know there's only a handful of folks here tonight, so we've got to push a message out to the broader community that there is work happening, logistical work that is being done behind the scenes, important labor conversations are happening, but that the goal, and I think it's realistic, is to start bringing these groups of students in. We've heard that it's happened in some limited fashions in other places. We observe that, we talk to those folks, we want to learn from them as well. And I remain optimistic that we will see groups of students coming in the coming weeks and months. As I follow the decision tree from Seattle King County Public Health, I do want to be honest with people about when you look at secondary, you've still got a lot of work to do to drop that number down before the decision tree recommends that we start bringing our secondary, middle and high school students in some kind of mitigated fashion down, get that case per 100,000 rate down to 25 or lower. But hey, we've made good progress. I'm proud of us as a county for getting that number down. We brought that number down quite a bit. We need to continue that good work. It's how we're going to get kids back into school. And just know we're doing the work behind the scenes to be prepared for that. And we'll continue to do that. And we'll message that out in a better way so that I just don't want our public to think that's not something we want, desire, and are working towards, because we are. And we just need to explain that better. I need to explain that better. So that, and then lastly, President Moraldo, I did want to allow Mr. Cooper an opportunity to give an enrollment update, because that is important and it's an interesting one this year. And then any questions that the board may have as well.
Okay, so we'll let Mr. Cooper talk, and then I'll do public input, because I need to make sure that after the superintendent presentation, we allow for public input on these items, and then we'll move to board comments and questions. Okay.
Thank you, President Moraldo, Superintendent Thiele. When a report out on the first week of school during a pandemic is the good news during the section, you'll know that my enrollment news is not going to be that great. So advance of the meeting, I sent the board and cabinet a simple spreadsheet that looks at the change from one year to the next in enrollment, and then budget versus actual. I'm not going to sugarcoat this at all. Enrollment at the elementary level is down nearly 9.5% year over year, and 2% respectively at each of the secondary grade spans. So I personally could have lived with an enrollment projection at the secondary level. It wasn't too far off the mark, as you can tell, but the elementary numbers were unpredictable and rather shocking, actually, when it comes to the amount of revenue that equates to. So every building in the system except 3 had declining enrollment. Sunny Hills was up whopping 10 kids, Pine Lake up 9. You can see those are basically the same catchment areas, and a lot of have the same similar housing driving that. And then Liberty was up 6. But we've had year over year declines in some buildings. You can see Grand Ridge is, you probably can't see as I'm not sharing the document, but Grand Ridge is down over 100 students year over year, and that's without K in the building, which is an interesting kind of enrollment that, you know, I would expect K in particular. Kindergarten was about 200 below projection, but the rest of it was evenly spread across the grade levels for the most part at K5. So I just want to reiterate that enrollment is down nearly 10% at elementary. So we are a system that is in significant decline when it comes to enrollment. And we are down 100 students at the middle level, and then another 100 at the secondary, which, as I said, relatively speaking, we could live with a couple hundred off enrollment projection. But when it comes to nearly 1,200 year over year in decline, that is a significant financial battle one that I know my colleagues are facing all around me as well, is our enrollment models. They aren't smart enough to project what a pandemic is going to do to educational choices. So what does that really mean for us? It means that we have this year about $14.8 million less in revenue coming than the budget you adopted nearly, what, a week ago, 2 weeks ago? So that is a significant amount of revenue lost to overcome. We will look to mitigate some of that with mid-year reductions. That number, however, is if enrollment does not bounce back in 21-22, that is going to force some rather draconian reductions to the system, also coupled with the reductions coming from the legislature. Now, the bright spot in this would be if you're a state legislature, your caseload counts K-12 around the state are going to be down, which will save you some money during the budget deficit that they're facing, but not good on the local side. And then, of course, we'll have further loss once our local levy kicks in because it's a per student right now, and that'll be the following year. Not a very rosy picture. Looks like fund balance, all said and done. I just received the report today from the county. I don't have my accruals, but it should end somewhere between the high 30s and low 40s and 40 millions. We had already anticipated burning between 4 and 6 million in fund balance. So we have some wood to chop to not completely eviscerate our savings account this year. So I have not had this negative of a financial report for quite some time. I had wished we had the hindsight to downsize the system in advance of this, but of course I failed at that, and I apologize. I wish we could have been a little more tightened down. I just did not know where to take that staffing from, because if we had started the year understaffed, it would make things even more difficult. There is a positive. We have very low ratios, K1 and K2, which will help us in our hybrid and return to school, because we have smaller classrooms that can be socially distanced. So there, I guess I will find a rainbow. There is some positives there. The current staffing levels, both on the classified and certificated side of the house, are not not maintainable going forward. And as I said, we'll seek and continue to seek reductions in the mid-year for what we can do, and then also have to reevaluate significantly our certificated staffing next spring. So is there any questions on that? And I do want to say that enrollment projections for next fiscal year are going to be extraordinarily difficult, because they're linear and they're based on they're backward looking. And so if you have 1 year that's an anomaly like this, if you build next year's staffing and enrollment and budget on this 1 year, you do have a risk of understaffing the organization if enrollment returns back. So that's one of I wanted you to put that on your radar, is that is a risk. So if I'm too aggressive next cycle, we can't afford that because we're already in a deficit position. But if we understaff, that doesn't put the right amount of teachers and support staff in front of kids. So that's the obstacle we face before us. So, any questions on that glowing report?
Well, we'll do public input, and then we may have questions for you. So as I promised, that when we come to agenda items, we will open it up to public input regarding the first week of school. So again, if you want to provide no more than 3 minutes of input to the school board regarding this topic, you can go down to where it says participants and then select the raise hand. So Ms. Gardner, I see that your hand is raised again. Before you speak, I do want to say for anyone else, we are going to hold a level of decorum, and I will remove you from the meeting if you don't follow that. Not that anyone that has spoken has had that problem yet, but in case anyone's lurking out there that thinks they're going to interrupt the meeting, we'll be doing that. So let me unmute you, Ms. Gardner, and thank you for sharing.
So this is really directed towards Superintendent Thiel as well as the assistant superintendents. And you really spoke to a tremendous amount of successes that you highlighted. And all of those successes are focused on your neurotypical students, which is exactly what the Issaquah School District did this summer when you offered in-person summer school to your neurotypical students while excluding your students who are not neurotypical. And for me, as a business owner, part of allowing my business to grow is to acknowledge our weaknesses and focus very specifically on how to fix those weaknesses to become a stronger organization. It is very confusing to me, since all of you administrators have been working since March of 2020 year round, why you haven't been able to get together with your unions and create a plan for your LRC2 and vulnerable students when we know it's occurring in multiple other districts. These kids have to have a plan, and you don't have a plan. I have read the email that went out 2 days ago, and I know what I think is going to happen, but stop patting yourself on your back. I get it. Things are going better than they were in the spring for your neuro.
Ms. Gardner, I'd appreciate if we had not disparaging language.
I apologize. But we as parents who are working just as hard as you are, the three of you, I am sure you're working 60-hour work weeks, just like I am. We can't teach our children and work those kinds of work weeks. We need a plan, something that's written down that shows us how our children are going to get their federal IEP minutes.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue? Seeing no raised hands, I will open this up to the school board. And by the way, you're now co-hosting the meeting, so you should be able to unmute yourself. Harlan.
So I have lots of probably more comments than anything else. First of all, I have 2 students in the district. I have a 7th grader and a 4th grader. And I will say that the start of the school year has been really, really smooth. And it's been better than expected. So hats off to the teams that have done that. And I know that the focus of the district over the past 4 to 6 weeks has been on getting the smooth start off for this remote learning year. And I think that you guys have been very successful at that. Probably more successful than a lot of districts around us and across the state. That being said, I think now is the time to pivot to really reach out. And the board made it very clear a month ago that we really, really prioritize serving our students with a lens of educational equity. And I really want to emphasize that, that, you know, one thing you said, Superintendent, is that to clarify that we dropped below the 75 per 100,000. And that was a mark that was county-wide. And that was a nod to what we heard from hundreds of staff saying, oh, but wait, I don't live in Issaquah or Sammamish, so the rate of the county is what matters. So we've checked that box now. And so now's the time to come to the table and say, okay, so that was the concern that was brought up. Now we've passed that threshold. As a district, I just calculated it, we're running 40 per 100,000. So we're almost down even to the low category. I also want to clarify that the decision tree was very clear that at the thresholds we were at, that the state encouraged districts to bring back students that was our youngest learners, K1, and that was our students farthest from educational justice, which included our LRC2 students. So that was well within the guidelines from the get-go. Now it says, in addition, elementary school. So that's already under the assumption that we brought back those groups. So I know that your team is working hard to do that. And my preference would I would like to see our superintendent and school district set a date for our whole community to work towards for when we would bring back our kindergarten and first grade students. I know you're working to bring back our special education students, and that's something that, because that requires so much more individualization, I know that's a much harder thing to do. And I don't believe through all the work and all the hearts and minds and conversations we've had that this district prioritizes neurotypical kids over other kids. I just don't believe that to be true because I see all the work that you guys do. That being said, I think that we do need to get out and do a public communication. I've seen what the Lake Washington district provided today, and I think our community is going to yearn for more frequent communication, even if it's, hey, we see the data, we know we're working on it. I think we heard from Director Weaver, who said, like, we're okay with messiness. And I think that truly is like, I don't think that anyone's going to hold us to a particular date, but I think by not speaking about where we're headed towards, they're left to think maybe that date is September 2081. So I think that's something that's important. You mentioned something about the caution that you were provided by Public Health Seattle King County about the 3-day Labor Day weekend and the impact. And certainly that may give you pause to delay a date, but I think that now is the time, since you've already said it's going to take the system several weeks to get moving, to do that planning, to identify your cohorts, match the teachers that aren't at high risk with the cohorts of classes that are wanting to come back in, and do that heavy lifting and mapping out plans. I think that the reality is if you're going to bring back kindergarten, first grade, you can have assigned seats on buses. And there's no reason why all of those processes can't happen, especially I don't even think we've done the kindergarten bus ride thing that we normally do in the spring. Like those are things that could happen now. We certainly have the bus drivers that could do that. So I think this is the time we start. If we're worried about training our kindergartners, this is the time to be doing that because we have the time and we have the available drivers. And you don't even have to have everyone come down to one place now. Like now, truly, you could set it up by school or feeder pattern or something much smaller because you actually have bus drivers that could do that. So I encourage us to think more broadly about what that means. Lastly, I wanted to say that I certainly appreciate our CFO's comments about the enrollment and the impact to the budget. But I think this also is the opportunity that we need to leverage both to our community and to our teaching staff. So they really understand that that 10% decrease in elementary, that may be something that doesn't come back. Because as families go to private school, they may feel like, oh, this is something that's working out better for us. My kids have gotten used to this cohort of kids. And frankly, we live in a community where they can afford to do that. So I think that the other thing about that elementary age is that's the age that's the safest to bring back. So it really hurts my heart to see that our lowest or our biggest decrease in enrollment is the kids that are the safest to bring back in the buildings from a pure public health standpoint. So for the health of the financial health of the system, we've got to get moving. Otherwise, we're going to have permanent long-term damage to our enrollments and our budgets. And our teachers need to know that it's not just going to impact our elementary teachers. Sure, they're the ones that may go back first, but these students all become 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders. So declining enrollment is going to impact everyone's job for a long time. And then my last thing is, do we do flu shot clinics for staff? Because in this year, this would be the time to be able to offer something like that, because our plug, we need to do a huge campaign to get flu shots for our students and teachers and community members, because that's going to be a huge mitigation effort that is going to allow us to do what we want to do educationally. Is a big campaign to get our community with flu shots, and now they have arrived into clinics in the area.
To answer Harlan's question, we have historically done flu shot clinics in our buildings. My understanding is they weren't planning on doing those this fall because so many staff aren't in the buildings. Only about 1/3 to 40% of the staff are in the buildings. But I don't know that that's a set thing or not. But I know I've always appreciated that I was able to get my flu shot right here in the office. And I certainly want to encourage everybody to get their flu shot this year.
Any other questions from board members? Sydney.
Yes. So, I mean, I guess maybe not questions, comments. Comments, certainly. I think it's important to just acknowledge, again, as a parent in the system, new high schooler, fifth grader, that this really, I think, has been a good start for us. I think we were quite concerned about the big transition year. And so I just want to acknowledge that how impressed I am with how things have gone. I think for me, the inner project manager in me really just needs to underscore the importance of being able to lay out for the board, for our staff, for our community, the components of the plan by which we return to school. And knowing that along that route, there will be decision points, there will be changes in information and data, but the criticality, I just can't underline more, is that I think our broader community needs to have something to look at that says, how are we thinking about, how do we conceptualize how will you return to school? What are the big groupings or sections of that return to school? What are some of the key pivots, changes, data, et cetera, that we're going to be mindful of? I know that there's a significant amount of work. I trust that very smart people are thinking about how to do that. I just want to make sure we're communicating that in a way that folks can absorb and consume, and frankly relieve the stress in the system of the not knowing, right? So much of the stress that I think folks are under is just not understanding what will happen, the worry that maybe considerations aren't occurring. And I think we have a huge way to go just to relieve that pressure valve of at least the uncertainty. We can't give the final answers, which I'm sure many people would love to have, myself included, because time will tell that. But I think we can lay out the plan for how we will go about this. And I just can't stress more that I believe that's what we have to do now.
Right. Anne. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, now am I unmuted? Okay.
Yeah.
That I totally agree or completely agree with Harlan and Sydney, laying out the idea of the importance of an overall plan on how we're going to get these special needs kids and then our youngest learners back into school. As Sydney said, I think it'll do a lot to relieve the stress of the community to see the overarching plan. And also it gives all of us something to work for. I mean, to know that we see that coming, if we can just hold on and continue to be good about how we behave and mask and hand wash and distance when we can, and doing all those things, because I know if we keep doing those things, it'll make it easier and better to get our kids into school and to keep them into school. So I think it will help us all have something to latch on to and to look forward to.
Suzanne.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo on the communications piece. And I know it's frustrating for the district because we can't say exactly what's going to happen and we can't say exactly when it's going to happen. My real concern is, and I think Ron, you and I heard this when we talked with PTA, is that when we don't say anything, people think we aren't doing anything. Mm-hmm. Now, the board knows that there's a ton of stuff going on behind the scenes with the administration and the teachers and everything else. We know that. The public doesn't. So when you don't address these things, even if you address them sort of fuzzily, when you don't address them at all, people think we're just not doing the work. We're not trying. We don't have a plan. Maybe those kids are never coming back to school. So that's my real concern. We have to balance that with the fact that, no, we don't have all the answers and we don't know how it's going to turn out, but we have to just give people our best ideas and trust them to understand that there may be unforeseen things that cause things to change.
Right. So I'd say my final kind of input is that, one, I appreciate all the hard work of all our staff members that have been involved in making our first week of school successful. I appreciate that we've heard from the community that the experience is better than it was in the spring. I think even from our staff that they feel more engaged, our students feel more engaged. I like the testimony that we heard and concerned about how we can best support students that, that are, that have the right to specialized education, that have the right to those services, and we need to fulfill that right. So for me, the biggest thing, again, goes back to the communication. This is not for the community. If you look at our decision tree and you look at our numbers, it's not, the question isn't if we get back into the classroom, if we get back into the school building. It's about when do we get back in the school building and how do we make that happen? So that's really, for me, the biggest discussion. So this isn't an if, maybe for high school, but I am hopeful that we can get under 25 per 100,000. Again, if we keep doing what we're doing, and we don't know what's going to happen over the winter and into the spring, but I think that we know so much more about this virus, and we know so much more as a community what we can do and what is our part to alleviating the transmission and reducing the transmission. And I think we have so many more people dedicated to doing those things. And that I appreciate. When I go to the grocery store, I see people that are in compliance with the mask wearing, and I see people social distancing. I'm not, I appreciate that because it enables us to do what we're doing. So I'm concerned about the numbers, the cases, and I think if we can get elementary schools opened and begin to get our youngest learners that haven't learned how to learn yet, I think we need to get them in the classroom, and the sooner we can do that, again, like Harlan and Jake were talking about, this will be a rolling impact if we don't help get those students back into schools. We pretty much, I think the education we've provided our community, and really thankful to community for supporting taxes, for supporting levies, for supporting the bonds for the buildings. We basically have provided, for what I've heard from community members in my area, a private school education in a public school setting. And I think that's what we do when we're in the building. And so the sooner we get there, we can bring back those students and say, we're going to provide this for you. We still will have the high level expectation for students. And I think with the schedule that we put forward for even remote live learning, that we're trying to say we want to provide robust learning for our students, and that we will continue to provide that for our students when they are remote. So that's kind of my final input. I do want to, again, talk about staff and just thankful for the work that they're doing both at the central office and all the way down into the buildings. Harlan.
I just had two more things that I wanted to say. The first one is, one thing I hear our district tout is that we've done $1 billion worth of building these beautiful community assets over the past decade plus. And I think we need to use them. And so I would encourage you to think more broadly. So one of the limitations that we don't have actually, is that there's no reason that we can't bring back more students at one time. Because I don't believe, I think wearing my public health hat, I wouldn't bring back cohorts earlier than 21 days apart. So if you brought K1 back, I would wait 21 days to make sure you don't have any impact to bring 2-3. But that doesn't mean that at the time you bring back 2-3 into the same building, that you couldn't bring our 4th and 5th graders back to our high schools. Like, we know that our high schools are going to be the latest to be used. We have literally hundreds of empty classrooms sitting there. So it doesn't have to be where you do 2 grades, wait, 2 grades, wait. It's really 2 grades wait if you're going into the same building. But there is no reason why you couldn't bring back K1. Make sure we dial down the process. Make sure we have everything figured out. And then you could bring back 2, 3, and 4, 5 at the same time, but in different buildings. So I would just encourage us to think more creatively about how we can serve the most kids, since the guidance has said elementary schools. So there's no really need to wait. I don't know how comfortable I feel about having 4th and 5th graders with our K3, because I wouldn't want to lose ground and saying, hey, we brought back K3, and then now because our 4th and 5th graders, as they age over 10, they're at higher risk. I don't want that to have us lose ground from what we have. So I would encourage us to think if we could have our elementary schools focus on K3 in the building and maybe find another space for our 4th and 5th graders. That way, as those kids that are over 10 potentially have a greater risk of spreading it compared to the kindergartners, for example, that it doesn't actually have us lose ground at all in our elementary schools. So just think about that.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, well, if you thought looking at your agenda that we were really going to get out by 8:20, you haven't met us. Okay, so our third item agenda is an update on spring 2020 grading. So Superintendent Thiele, I'm sure you're going to have a slight presentation on this.
Yeah, well, first of all, yes, and this is, we've been talking a lot about the current year and about our hopes and plans and desires for the coming weeks, the future. This is going to be a little bit of a look back. The board had raised some questions about, if you recall, we were put into an unusual grading situation with the emergency closure of schools last March and the shift to emergency learning after that. The state put out rules saying that no student would receive an F during that time, but could receive an incomplete. As a district, we chose to grade our students, and obviously not giving the F and giving the incomplete. And the board had questions. Well, how did that work? How did the grades turn out? Where are you at with your incompletes? So I see Executive Director of High Schools, Donna Hood, has unmuted her video. And if we could unmute her audio, she would love to share. And I know that she sent out some information to the board earlier. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, but I think Donna will kind of walk through some of those numbers for you. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Donna.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate it. So we had, at the time of the closure, we had about roughly 35,000 grades that we issued. About 21,000 of those were A's at the time. So this was roughly around our marking term 3, we like to call it, MT3 in the lingo, which is really halfway through quarter 3. And we had about 7,800 B's, 3,700 C's, about 1,800 D's. Interestingly, at that time, we had about 2,800 F's approximately. And looking at where we landed semester 2, I think it really does tell the story of how hard our staff and counselors and grad specialists, our teachers, worked with their kids in their classes. They clearly improved many, many, many grades. So our A's went up by 5,000, for example, and our B's, C's, and D's went down. And probably the most telling data point here of that incredible hard work that they did is that our F's were nowhere near that in terms of where they landed, right? We had to make sure that those were not F's on a student's transcript per the OSPI guidance and rules. So they ended up, we had only 710 incompletes issued at the end of second semester, which is really stunning to me. So I'm very excited to see how much our teachers were able to accomplish, how much our counselors were able to do with families, grad specialists, all those folks who had those meetings with kids and really supported them. We had approximately 57 incompletes resolved in summer school. So one of our priorities there was really to allow for the opportunity for kids to resolve incompletes if they wanted to or needed to. Since that time, we have confirmed OSPI will allow students to graduate with an incomplete on their transcript, provided they meet the state and local graduation requirements. So there will be some of these that don't need to get resolved. And I just want to be clear about that too. And in many ways, that's a good news story. We have about 653 left to deal with. We will obviously work with this year's seniors first and work our way backwards because they have the least time on the clock, if you will. That's one way of putting it, to resolve those incompletes, but we have lots of options. So first, as I mentioned, we'll assess whether or not it needs to be resolved. We can look backwards at PSAT scores from last year to see if they might have a score that would qualify to resolve an English or math incomplete. We've also worked on a list of courses, and pardon me, I'm just scrolling through my notes here. A list of courses that are the next highest level in a sequence that could be used to backfill an incomplete from spring 2020. And our teachers were looking at the essential new learnings this summer anyway. And because that linkage of courses had to be based on standards, we asked those groups to also do that work. So they did it, and we're not entirely complete yet. We're probably 95% done with the list. So that draft is going out to counselors and administrators so that they can start working from the approved list. And then I think we still have some that we can add. We just needed more time to think through whether or not it met the criteria spelled out by OSPI. We'll also look at whether or not students had qualifying AP scores from May 2020, because many of our students did test. So that could also help them resolve some scores. And this spring, if we do have any AP or IB testing, those scores could also help. We also are expecting to have to test through the SBA, our state testing process, twice this year. We don't have a lot of detail yet from OSPI on when or how, but we've been told to expect twice. Typically, it's been sort of a winter and a spring admission of that test. So we'll see how that happens. And we could use those scores too, potentially, to resolve an incomplete. I imagine many of these will get resolved just through the coursework kids are in right now and using that next highest level, but I can't say exactly how many. It really depends on the kid's individual schedule. I did ask one of our student information systems people to take a peek for me. We have 44 kids who are retaking a class right now because that was their choice, and probably in conjunction with their counselor figured that was the best option for them. And some may completely retake a class in the spring. It just depends on what their need is, what their passions are, and how it might connect to their post-high school plans as well.
Great. Any questions then from the board or comments? Sydney.
Thank you. This is actually really interesting to see the difference. What I just don't have familiarity with is this distribution of grades. Is this how did this end? Did it end on par with previous non-pandemic years, or
right.
How did it shake out?
Probably not, Sydney, and I think that's a really wonderful question. MT3 kind of hit at sort of awkward time for people. So depending on where our teaching staff were in the middle of a unit, they may not have had a major something that they had already graded. And so it was a struggle for our CERT staff. I will be utterly honest about that. I think they really had to think about, how do I do this now in a way that makes sense? Because we knew student grades couldn't go down. We really had to work hard to communicate with kids the purpose for the learning, how it was going to benefit them now, today, as a human, in addition to how it might benefit them this year and on into their future plans. Because if I was, a kid who had an A at MT3, I knew this isn't going down. So how do I keep that kid engaged? I think the good news, though, is because we offered the B, C, and D options, anybody who had a grade that they didn't yet like had a shot at bringing it up. So I think we were able to keep many, many students motivated in that way. But depending on where it fell with a teacher's planning and their unit, it could have been at a slightly awkward time. I wouldn't say it's entirely representative of where we might have been.
Harlan.
I want to say thank you for bringing us this information. Were you able to have a sense on the equity pieces of it? Like, this is all the global district data. Like, our students farthest from educational justice, did we see, like, if I were to ask you, so for our students that are on IEPs, what would that breakdown look like? Or our students that are ELL or in poverty?
Yes,
so would be really telling.
Yes.
To really let us get the impact on how did remote learning impact these populations?
Our student information systems person, I did ask her to disaggregate this for me, and she did get it to me that way, but I didn't have enough time to really look at that and run enough, really think about it enough and figure out how to format it for you. I only had that for about a day. So I can certainly prepare that for another time and would be happy to.
Yeah, please do, Donna. That would be, we would love to see that. And you can just send it out too when you get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Sydney.
So this data is specifically high school, but it was a similar, I guess, are we counting middle school for high school credit, or is that in here as well?
No, these were for students who were in the high schools, enrolled at the high schools. Now, your point is a good one, though. So recently, the state changed the rules around high school classes taken in middle school. So students used to have to opt into the high school credit. Now they opt out of the high school credit. So those will be transcribed, but kids have up to the end of their junior year to decide if they want that. So we will put it on and they can request that we remove it all the way through the end of junior year, but those are not reflected in this data.
There's actually a very small trace, as we have a few 8th graders at all 5 of our middle schools that take Algebra 2 at the high school in a high school course, not very many. And then we have a few kids at Liberty who also take biology on the 8-period day. I would say district-wide, you're probably looking at, I don't have that number in front of me, but just from my years as a middle school principal, somewhere between 10 and 20 kids district-wide. So there are a small group of kids that take courses at the high school, but that group is very small.
Right, but wouldn't there also be students who are in the middle school who are taking Algebra 1 or geometry?
Yep.
Yes. But they end the year with an incomplete. So they need the opportunity to make it up in whatever fashion to get complete off their transcript and a real grade.
They will have the same options, but I pulled this by entity code. So if they're not enrolled in one of my high schools, I didn't pull them. But yes, these options would also apply to all of them.
And we'll probably want to continue to just kind of keep that as a rolling, your staff is going to certainly keep that as a rolling look as the years go by. Because once those 8th graders become 9th graders, suddenly that incomplete is on their high school transcript, right? So then they will be in that entity for you to be able to say, yeah, we need to fix this sometime beforehand. But seriously, if they're in math and they got an incomplete, I hope they're redoing that math course.
Well, and that is one of the many ways that they can resolve the incomplete. And they also don't have to bring it up. They can ask for it to be removed. So, and all these other options apply.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. A middle schooler doesn't have to take that incomplete and put it on their transcript. That they have a choice whether or not to add that credit or not add it.
Right. I'm just saying that math is foundational. Mm-hmm. You have to have the first piece before you get to the next. So if they have an incomplete, I'm hoping that they're retaking to be able to really understand those materials so that they can be more successful in their future math classes. And I see you unmuted.
I was just going to say, it really just depends on why the student has the incomplete.
Absolutely.
Age, but they fully understood all the material. It really depends on what the issue was for each individual student.
I think ultimately that's true for just about every one of these cases, Director Moore. That's why we encourage them to have these conversations with their guidance counselors, with their teachers, family members. I was encouraged though by it, and I will say, I'll add this too. I still stand behind the decision we made to give those letter grades, especially when I saw the biggest movement in grades in that data was more kids getting A's. I was really encouraged by that. I think it had the motivating effect that we wanted it to have during a very unusual learning time. So.
Anyone else? Okay. I did not ask the public if there was any input regarding the last year's grades? And I'm not seeing any. The next is the discussion of the Wasda Board of Distinction application. So I know Ann and I have met with staff, we've met with each other, we're almost done. We have to still strike down to get to at least get under our 3,000 characters. So Sydney, when we're done, we're going to tell you, please help make this better, but you can't add an iota to it.
Make it better by only removing words.
Yes.
Yes, or be creative. Anything you want to add, you need to go find something to remove first.
Yeah.
I'll use all my editing skills.
So Suzanne, we gave you a couple, you and Harlan one thing and you something else.
Yeah.
How's it going?
I've pretty much written the what was it, the professional development blurb, and I don't know why I haven't sent it to you. I should, and you can do anything you want to with it. Harlan sent me last night a really nice essay on the benchmark. It's probably 10 or 20 words too long. And of course, I got a couple things I want to add to it. So I'm going through it and, making it come out right. But we're really close. It's just, I only got it this morning and because he stays up way later than I do. So I haven't finished.
I apologize to Director Weaver and to the board for being late with this. This is like one of my busiest weeks of the year is this week. And I just don't.
Hey, I only nagged you once. That was pretty good.
Yeah.
So
I really appreciate this. Again, I mean, whoever's board president next year, you're welcome to stop the cycle, but I am not going to be the president that doesn't win Board of Distinction when this board has won it every single year it existed. So.
Oh, actually, Harlan,
Don't jinx it, Marnie.
I do have one
I'll
thing.
let them decide.
Yeah, I do have one thing on what you sent me, which is, and maybe we can just talk on this offline, but we need to attach evidence to it. And my first thoughts were the equity policy, maybe an agenda for one of the listening sessions. And then I was wondering, is there like a one-page summary of the thought exchange that we did around springtime learning? Is there any way that there'd be something that we could put on there as a piece of evidence?
We, if you recall, did a write-up, a communication post thought exchange, basically saying what our learnings were. I think it's the one that was titled Distance Learning 2.0. I've got it for you, Suzanne. So if you just.
I would just make sure it includes like how many participants there were and if you shared with it the key summaries tonight on what you heard from it, if that's also in it.
Yeah,
I think that's really powerful. The one I talked about was about how we communicate and learn and are open for feedback and dialogue. Right. So.
Yeah, I know it covers the three fundamental learnings from the thought exchange. I'll have to go back and look and see if it has the numbers. I think it was about 11,000 people, if I recall, participated. I may be confusing that with the Bell thought exchange. So maybe I'm wrong about that. I have to go back and look.
We're just trying to make the point that we reached out and learned things from lots of people.
It was,
and I don't, yeah, Harlan, unless you had other thoughts of what we should use.
No, I think that's great. Just since I sent it to you so late, we didn't have a chance to talk about it till now. I didn't want to presume until we actually get it sort of finalized essay-wise. Then we can load the evidence for the essay.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Ann and I had a meeting with Pam Rittenauer and Kelly. I can't remember her last name. And so we talked a little bit about kind of what options are available, especially around SEL and the BZ and the SDQ and how that data is utilized to determine who's at risk to be able to do the MTSS. So that was kind of how we're dealing with the equity gap, because when you look at our data, we're not. And as a board, we're going to have to start having a conversation probably at this next SIP. We might want to look at how we have our discussion with our principals around, we continue to have school improvement goals, we continue to have opportunity gap closing goals, and we continue to not meet them. And if you look at our data, it's getting, the gap is growing instead of closing. So, you know, we put together and we did all the work around our equity policy. And I think that we're using MTSS as a way of being able to start to find out what is the reason behind the things that are keeping students from being able to engage. And if they're not engaging, they're not learning. And so I'm hopeful that we'll see those trends move back to where they've been. And then I would hope that in our system statewide, that of all the school districts, I would like to see our school district finding out how to actually close the gap. I think we have the skilled staff and dedicated staff. I think we have a great teaching and learning department to really get at how do we best reach students and meet their needs. And we have a community that's willing to share with us the good and the bad and the ugly. And we've seen those in our emails, what's working for them, what's not. So I think together collectively, I am hoping we can get to a point that we can see how do we get the outreach to be able to really get at that gap closing. So, and I'm hopeful that our multi-tier system of support will get us there. So I think we've got some good data that we'll be able to provide, but hopefully next year, the better data would be to see a gap closing. I think that's the best data of all, and we don't have that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then I'll close by saying, although they've extended, I think, by a week, I really would like to be able to have at least the data. So if I wanted to get it in by the 15th, I could. But looking at my calendar, really by that Friday the 18th would be at the latest. So I'd like to be able to hit the submit button on the 18th. So, and one of their things is that I know that we do it trying to condense all of our evidence onto 3 pages for each essay is going to be an important piece of that. And I can then just let me know once you have that formatted, send it to me. You can send it as a PDF if it's easier to make sure it stays formatted properly, and then I'll upload those and your essays. And then we leave it to the committee to say, are we a board of distinction? I think we are. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is legislative matters.
Now that schools have gotten back into the swing of things, I think it's time for us to start thinking about our fall liaison meetings with our legislators. And I think it'll be easier actually to do them all at once because we're all on remote with Zoom. But I still think that we should, I think one of the things that we do that's different than a lot of other districts is we bring content with it. So since we can't do like a site visit into our amazing dual language kinder classrooms, I was thinking that some sort of topic presentation, either something that you just mentioned, Marnie, like, I mean, SEL work continues to be something that we really focus on, and that intervention, student interventions. And I think that something that would be unique is we're continuing our investments with our social emotional learning and mental health, and they've continued to serve students through that. So I think it might be helpful for them to hear sort of how are they serving students remotely, they being our counselors and mental health counselors, because I don't even know the answer to that because I don't have high schoolers. But I'm throwing it out to the board. If the board has a different topic that you think that we could spend half an hour of listening and learning as we do some content presentation and then just dialogue and discussion and advocacy for the second half, I'm open. But I think now's the time for us to start planning that. So I want to open up for thoughts.
Would this be a time that we'd want to talk about the like broadband and the whole area of access and availability of broadband?
Yeah, I think that broadband broadband connectivity is a huge topic in the legislature. I think the amount of dialogue across the state is going to push it in that for us, I don't think that would be something that would be that we're going to need to push that one, in my opinion, as far as I think that there is going to be other districts who have far greater needs than us that are speaking very loudly about that. I think we can continue to support it.
Yeah.
I think that there are other districts that are so heavily impacted with the inequities of that I think their voice is going to be heard louder than ours, is what my point is. But we're in agreement with their voice. So I know Federal Way and Tacoma have been having difficulty even serving their students currently with the school opening. Maybe Superintendent Thiele can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard specifically from those two districts are really feeling the pain of even being able to serve their students. And so in Tacoma, they're still like making photocopies of things, and the bus drivers are dropping stuff off.
Yeah,
for students.
they didn't have enough laptops.
Right.
If I heard right, I don't believe they issued laptops to any of their elementary students. So remote learning by packet is essentially what's happening. I have heard about significant connectivity issues and lack of broadband availability in the Highline, Federal Way school districts. I would suspect probably Franklin Pierce. Yeah, it's a bigger issue. It's a real issue even for us. I have to say, I literally start every day just wondering, well, is the internet going to hold up today when, 1 million school students hit it pretty close to the same time? So far, thankfully, knock wood, it's held up better than I thought it would. But it's something that is still a concern. But I agree with Harlan. I absolutely, we will lend our voice in support of that. I don't know that I don't think we need to be the champions of that particular issue, because there are places where it's of a much greater impact. I'm very thankful that we have what we have here. And I don't take it for granted, that's for sure. And we certainly want to help our friends and colleagues as much as we can in that area. And I do know from direct communications with Senator Wellman that this is a top issue in their thinking right now too.
Harlan, what are some of the, because I was thinking kind of some of the hold harmless that we got an email from Christine Chu that they were talking about some of the hold harmless.
Yeah, sorry, I guess, we can frame what we want to actually have our list of advocacy things as we prepare that later on. I guess tonight I was wanting to clarify what content we would want to share with our legislators, not from an advocacy phase. That will be the second part of the conversation. But from usually we do, like I said, we do a tour, we talk about a focused topic. That's what I want, because our staff need to prepare for that. That's why for their sake, I'm trying to find out from the board here what that focused topic discussion will be, so they have time to prepare. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then advocacy things we'll structure as we get closer, because I would want to do that after Wasda's General Assembly, so we're not too far out of alignment with Wasda.
I think we have one legislator that is active in our board meetings, and then we have everyone else that isn't. And so I think our equity work, they don't understand, and they don't know what that means, and they don't know what we're doing. I think if we talk about the programs of what it is we are trying to do, I think being one of the first in the state to pass an equity policy, what that means and how that guides our work, even as we're still trying to figure that out, but letting them know, I think that might be something I would be interested in sharing with them, because I think that they would all appreciate that work is being done. Okay,
so we could bring Elena Sivadasan as the Director of Equity and sort of the Superintendent, and Elena could talk about just our story over the past 12 months and sort of his thinking on where it's come from, because he's obviously been instrumental as our Chief Equity Officer on that work. So I'm fine with that, as long as the rest of the board is fine with that focused topic conversation.
Anyone else's thoughts? Head nods, thumbs up. Okay.
Okay. So I will work on connecting with those legislative offices. And once we get down to a date and time, I will then open up to the board for joining.
Harlan, would you let me know if you need financial data for our trip, as we usually do, our demographics, and I can cook that up for you anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get that. Once I get to the one pager, as I think what we were trying to jump to right away, as far as what's going to be on the one pager, as far as our legislative priorities and advocacy, I think that we'll get to that, and that'll be the topic of our next meeting. So I hope to be able to report out to you guys some tentative dates and times at the next meeting then. Thank you. Does that seem like a reasonable topic and sort of discussion point for our superintendent?
I mean, I think talking about our equity journey is a great thing for us to work on. And I think having it's becoming much more sophisticated work in our system too. You know, I mean, from where we were just 3 years ago to the kinds of things that our equity department, which we now have a standalone equity department, is doing, it's much more sophisticated. They've taken the level of work to places that I hadn't even thought of, which is why we needed to have an equity department with the folks that we have. So I think it would be interesting. I think it's something that, you know, yeah, I always think in terms of, well, what's the legislative ask here? You know, because I believe that the legislators that I've talked to recognize the importance of equity work is one of the main vehicles, if you will, to try to narrow or eliminate opportunity gaps. And so at some point, when does it become important enough to be funded? I mean, we fund it, but.
Right. Like I said, I think one thing that sets us apart with our legislators is we would really try and build in some learning for it. And
yeah,
like here's a levy funded initiative that we do.
Yes.
And to your point of at some point, they may make it their own. Like SEL may ultimately be state funded at some point when our kids are no longer in school.
Yeah.
But I think that having that ability to dialogue and have them learn about a topic is really important.
Since it sounds good. Yeah.
Not all of the 6 of them are education focused.
Right. Yeah, no, I like the idea, and I know that Elena will like it, because whenever she has an opportunity to educate and promote equity, that's what she wants to do.
Great. Okay. That's it.
Okay, super. Works in progress, Superintendent Thiele.
Yeah, the first thing I wanted to share tonight is something that I've had the opportunity to share with the board many times over the years, and it's something we should all be very, very proud of. And that is a letter that I received last week. I guess now, well, it's dated August 31st. I don't think I got it before that, but from OSPI, and it's this letter here, and I've actually underlined part of it, and it's about our bus inspections and our transportation department and our mechanics. And I'm only going to read the one line that I underlined. The results in your district have been outstanding. They go on to say that we have had the State Patrol annual inspections have been outstanding 2 years in a row. And frankly, it's been a lot more than that. It must be kind of like Board of Distinction. You know, once you get to a certain level, they just make you go back over it again or something. But I just really wanted to give those folks a shout out because they do an amazing job. I'm very proud of our transportation department and the folks in our buses. And I just long to see those buses rolling around on our roads again. So kudos to them. I wanted to share that. I wanted just to note that hopefully people have now received their district calendar, the art calendar, the collaboration with the foundation, because it's got lots of great information on it, like the fact that we just are starting National Arts and Education Week. And I bring that up now because I know I've heard I've been on the periphery of some conversations with art teachers about how they're going to do art in our virtual setting. And we talked a little bit about materials distribution. I know that some of that is to support art. So some materials distribution could literally be a 10-pound bag of clay, things like that. So the arts are still very much alive in the system. I will tell you, we kind of had big plans for art because one of the things, as you know, we've been transitioning some of the foundation managed programs into the district. We did voice last year, and that's been going really well. We were bringing in the arts coordinator as well as to the district, but some of those plans have had to kind of get put on the side as we've been managing remote learning in COVID. But just wanted to give that shout out at National Arts and Education Week. And we also started today from September 15th, we start from September 15th to October 15th, but this month, Hispanic Heritage Month. And just wanted, again, to acknowledge that as we strive to be a more culturally competent district. Our Latinx population has grown over time in this district to, I believe we're right around 9-10% of our students of Latinx origin. And so just a shout out to Hispanic Heritage Month. I did want to note too, just some things that staff have been hard at work on. Our bargaining teams, our HR department has been really hard at work, and that work has obviously got to continue with even a greater sense of urgency post our discussion that we're having here tonight. Our TLS staff, our Teaching and Learning Services Department, boy, they have really been pressed during this time to just kind of change the way they do everything. It's been pretty remarkable to watch what they've been able to do. And this is a department that was understaffed before we went into COVID, and to really accomplish what we wanted. They were part of our strategic staffing plan, and we pulled back on that for obvious reasons last spring. But they have really stepped up. Rich and his entire team down there, I say down there because they're the floor right below me, and have really done a nice job supporting our teachers during this challenging time, but they've really stepped up well for that. The other thing that has been a big work product this last couple of weeks is I didn't realize that we'd gotten a little bit of a respite in a way from property acquisition and permitting and trying to get buildings built in a growth management area with incredibly scarce property and just challenges in multiple cities. But this last week, it came back. We've got more work to do, specifically around our high school, Providence Heights High School 4 Elementary 17 site. I know we received a letter that the city of Sammamish had submitted with concerns about our project. So we need to do more I sent them a letter into public input, but we recognize we need to do some more outreach to help them better understand kind of what we hope to accomplish on the site and the goals of that project. The city of Issaquah, and I'll bring this up in calendaring, is scheduling a study session to review the site plan and where we're at and what mitigations and steps have taken since last March or last winter, if you will, on that project. And so I have reached out. We're re-engaging with folks related to that. I have also, just as a side note, I reached out to the Providence Point Umbrella Association. I got to know some of those folks, as did Marnie and Harlan with me through meetings that we had last year. And then they had a change in the president of that organization. So I reached out to the current, what I thought was the current president, and they've all been lovely, I have to say, to work with. And she has since moved on. So now there's a new president. So this will be the third Umbrella Homeowners Association president that we've been working with. Seems very pleasant. We just had an email exchange. I just wanted them to know that I'm available. If they have questions or anything like that, to just reach out to me personally. Happy to do that. But so work around that site is back. And I know that, like I say, I know the board has received some information as well. I figured during calendaring, I would talk a little bit more, President Moraldo, about the study session that the city of Issaquah is planning as well. Because I know you may have some thoughts on that as too. So That and just making sure that we got off to a good start of the school year. That's been the focus of work for the last couple of weeks. So that's all I had for tonight.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Harlan? Oh, no? Okay. And I think, yeah, calendaring future agenda topics is when I wanted to kind of update around calendaring some time for the school board to maybe talk to the city councils in a formal manner. So next on the agenda is announcements and correspondence. And I will offer my apologies to the board and to Diane. I have not reviewed which correspondences are not on this list. But does anyone else have any that they can add? Anne?
I don't have a correspondence. I was just going to say that since I've attended the Issaquah Kiwanis meetings in the past, they asked me to do just a little info session on the start of school. And so I'm doing that next week, and I'll probably just reiterate a lot of what Ron talked about for the beginning of school. And then I thought I would just go back to our Board of Distinction. I'm sorry, during that conversation, I kept having this coughing, so I didn't chime in, but I wanted to indicate that I'm also working on the piece about flex time, and that both Donna and I've also talked to Keith at Skyline have been very helpful getting us the information that we need to put into that. So sorry about not being able to join in them, but I didn't want to start coughing all over our conversation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for putting that in. You can tell who wrote which piece.
Yeah.
I wrote that. Anything else? I wanted to share that as part of the NSBA board, we're re-looking at kind of just a strategic overall view of the organization. And so they're going to put a small group together that includes the board leadership, so the executive director, the executive committee, and then I think people like from the AASA, maybe even the principal organizations, to kind of talk about what should the best strategy be for us to best support our state agencies. And I have been invited to be a part of that. So over the next couple of months, we'll be meeting to really know that. So if you have thoughts about how could NSBA best serve us, I might be a good person to tell that to. Okay, well, if there's nothing more on that, we will move into calendar and future agenda topics. So I should probably share with you, first of all, if Diane is on the phone or on there that wants to undo, I don't know that there's anything that we need to take action on. I didn't see.
She asked us to take action on the SIP meetings.
Okay.
So if you want, I can give you a motion so we can do that.
Perfect.
Okay. I move the board hold 3 school improvement plan meetings from 1 to 4 p.m. on February 25th, March 4th, and March 18th, 2021, the place to be determined.
Second.
Okay, any comments or input or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. So those are our official dates. So
thank you.
Thank you. And was there anything else, Diane?
Nothing that needed to have action taken.
Okay. And then I don't know if we've done our work around registering for annual conference. Has that already been done?
No.
And when does that open up? Is it open now?
It is open now. Mm-hmm.
So I think this might be a good time to share with Diane if you would like to be considered for attending that. I think Harlan and I will be registered automatically, whether we want to or not. And we'll probably want to see how it goes.
So Marnie, how's it going to work?
I don't know. I have no
We're
idea.
going to register for something that we don't know how it's going to work.
Yeah,
No,
I
they-
think.
they
Well,
map it all out on the Wasda website.
Is it? Okay. I'll take a look.
Like you would your normal conference schedule where you just choose to you'll choose the sessions you want to go to, and what you heard Dr. Moraldo talk about is that later, once it's over, they're going to load them and you go back and look at the ones you didn't look at.
so synchronous and asynchronous learning.
Be a lot like this, it'll be a lot like school for the kids, right?
Right. Right.
Just
so you can
staring
attend
at
live.
computer screens for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah. And I did see they have pre-conference with the law session, Suzanne.
Yeah, although they also had an equity session, so.
Yeah, I'll read the reviews or the write-ups and see what they say. And then should we reach out to you, Diane?
Yes, if you want to just email me and let me know if you plan to attend and what sessions you'd like, I'll get the 3 of you signed up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Harlan and I will have a great time at our pre-conference called a Wasda board meeting. Good times, good times. So I wanted to run through what I had written down as potential retreat items, and see if there's things that you want me to put big stars by, like, yes, we absolutely want to do that, and then scratch out, or things that I'm missing. So the first one is to talk about our board self-assessment. And I sent out an email. I don't remember if I sent it out to everybody or if I just sent it out to Harlan to get some advice. I am thinking about asking Wasda if they will do a 2-hour session with us to go through the board self-assessment, because they offer that workshop. I think it's at a cost of around $500 for them to come in, and they can facilitate us having a conversation around it. Now, we typically have our conversations around it anyway, but I think it would be interesting to bring them in to facilitate how we have those conversations, and wanted to get your thoughts on that before I send out that email. No one's saying no.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what it'll look like, so
I don't know either. And then I did want to say to the Board of Self-Assessment, Rashad from Wasda got back to me and said, all your 5 board members have submitted. So I needed to find out. Usually we have the board members and superintendent. Rashad wouldn't know that. So did all 5 of us and our superintendent do the board self-assessment?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I need to figure out from Rashad why he only has 5 answers when there should be 6. And I may just say, we don't know which one of us. So I don't know if we have to take it again, or if we can just say, let's have a conversation about the 5 answers, and we'll just live with the fact that we only have 5 instead of 6, which is what I prefer, because I don't want to take that thing again. I know I won't give the same answers.
definitely.
I won't remember.
It should be able to tell us which one it didn't record.
Yeah, that's confusing to me why they wouldn't know. I mean, it's done digitally. It comes in.
Yeah, but I don't think that we say who it is.
Yeah, but ask them for the date and time stamp of each.
I think it actually asks if you're a board member or the superintendent. If I take a number of surveys, but I thought that it asked that.
Okay,
I mean, I brought it up at the last board meeting because I was feeling so good about myself for having taken it.
I agree. I did too.
I did it right after that board meeting, after you felt so good about yourself.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I did mine early, and I think you had 2 in the slot, and I was one of them. So I'm pretty sure they have mine.
So I'll find out from, I'll call Rashad and try to figure that out, and then invite him or Trisha to facilitate for us. So I think that would be good. So the next item I had on our upcoming potential retreat items is to update our E1 mission, which will be an initial conversation. Obviously, we're not going to actually do the revision at the board retreat, but to start talking about what pieces we like of our current E1, what pieces we don't like. My personal opinion is, can we make it something that is more measurable so we can actually start monitoring it, which is kind of a unique idea. We've never monitored E1. So I have that as a list of conversation. Review of the ELs. Number one, we typically kind of just go through and take a look at our policies, but really with a mindset of how can our ELs shore up and support EL 16. So how can EL 1 through 15 support the work we're doing on EL 16? And specifically around that, we had talked about EL 2, how can we better deal with informal complaints and formal complaints? Also on EL 2, we have the terms illegal discrimination, and yet we as a board I don't know how that marries up to what we have in EL 16. And then I also have an EL 12, cannot fail to institute equitable grading practices or something to that effect as adding that in. So that's some of the conversation pieces, but obviously I want to take a look at all of the ELs. To me, just those three things is like a day. I'm not done. Let me finish up the other four and then we can. The next one is a discussion on homework, and that would be with a conversation with our high school admins and high school principals, talking about, and maybe even middle school, what is homework? What is its purpose? We've had a lot of conversations around grading. We've had a lot of conversations about multiple opportunities to show proficiency. But in that, we haven't talked directly about homework and what does homework look like. And especially why I think this is important and why I'd like to see this in October is we have students that are doing classwork at home. So then what does it look like to then do homework at home? If you have done 7 hours of Zoom meetings, what is the expectation to do beyond that? So I think it's a timely discussion. We had our conversation about this board student reps, so I think that we will be able to scratch that one off. Another interesting one that has come up is the role of our SROs in our schools, especially this past summer and spring. We've had a lot of conversations as a community around law enforcement and really understanding what is our kind of ideas around having an SRO, and that the community is really kind of asking for that. I know that this is a conversation that I think Council Member Hunt in the Issaquah Council, City Council President, has talked about wanting to have a conversation in our leadership meeting around that. So I think it would be interesting also for us to have an opportunity to talk about that. And the last item that I have is the review of our SIP data collectively. So a little bit of what I alluded to earlier. I really enjoyed having the more robust data, consistent data across groups. We did our SIP meetings, and one of the things we had hoped to do in the spring, and then this life changed for us, is to really talk about what are we hearing during our SIP meetings, and what are we gleaning from that as a system to support student success. So those are my issues. Superintendent Thiele, you had your hand raised first.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it, but Executive Director Mellish did ask for some time to also talk about SIP plans and how they would be updated and look differently, obviously, this year, given that a lot of the data points we just aren't going to have. Now, he has a plan, and he's been communicating that. He wants an opportunity just to sit with the board and share his thinking with the board, obviously, before we get too far down the road, to make sure that you're all on board with the current thinking related to that. And so if we could just include some time in your SIP discussion for that would be great. And then the other, just a suggestion I would have, if you, the discussion related to the discrimination policy, there might be an opportunity there that you would want to hear from some legal counsel on that as well, because it's just a complicated issue. I'm not sure, I'm not even saying that it necessarily would need to be like exec session. It might just be, you want to hear kind of a legal opinion related to that. That's just a thought there. And then I like the idea of the homework discussion. And it was, I think Donna had brought forth the idea too, that it would be good to have our principals there, because a lot has changed in homework over the last few years. And I think we just haven't talked about it that much too. So that was more lean towards high school, but you mentioned President Moraldo Middle School. I think that might not be a bad idea as well. I will say the bulk of the homework concerns that we hear have been at the secondary. And that's been true all the way back from when the PTA conducted their survey work a number of years ago now too. So for time's sake, you may want to focus that more on the secondary.
Okay.
And that was it.
I think what I found with my kids going through middle school was much more about grading practices, especially around, oh, it's going to be harder in high school, so we're going to grade you really hard now. And a lot of expectations around behaviors were included in those grades. Whereas I think in the high school, it really is about, you're sitting, you're learning this, and now I need you to go home and learn more. And what that does for our students.
I think the middle school issue was more around, missing work and zeros and how that impacted grading much more than actual homework.
Yeah.
It's my recollection.
Sydney.
I don't think we ever had time to talk about our listening sessions.
With students?
We did teacher listening sessions.
We did 2 out of 3 of the teachers listening sessions. And we will do the 3rd one when we can do it in person.
And so we'll hold the debrief of that until after the 3rd.
Mm-hmm. And then Harlan can take all of the Menti data that's there, put it together for us to then review.
But our plan is, as soon as we can host meetings for us, the board can be at least partially or wholly together in a room, and then we can Zoom in our teachers who will be working remotely. It's about wanting to address and prevent some of the stuff that happened tonight's meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But thank you for making sure we keep on that, because that is, we want to get that last listening session in and then have a conversation, because I am forgetting what I heard. So I'm glad that it's documented on Menti. So anything else? I think that's a pretty full agenda. And I think some of it is staff focused, but it's not, I think we're moving away from the staff come in and update us. It's about conversations together, which I think is really an important use of our time together. So, okay, if there's nothing else, last item on the agenda. Oh, Suzanne, before we get to that last item.
Oh, is there another item?
It's called adjourning.
Oh, yeah. I do have one more thing, because Ron and I and some of the cabinet did the Zoom with the PTA council president. And I mentioned that none of us had attended a council meeting since we closed school, because they went to Zoom and they stopped inviting us. And she assured me that she was going to send a list of the meeting dates and whatever to Diane, and Diane would disperse it to us so that we could once again decide among ourselves if 1 or 2 people want to attend a council meeting. And I believe the first one is a week from today. So
yeah,
I'm happy to go unless other people want to go. Does anybody else want to go?
I like going, but I would need to know the time, because there's a Eastside Human Services Forum board meeting that Thursday morning.
Well, I'm assuming they still meet at 9:30. I don't know, Diane, do you know anything different?
I have not received the list yet, but I'll reach out to Erin and get that from her.
Okay.
I'd consider going too, if but just some of them. Just eventually, I'd like to go.
Yeah. Well, no, and I was just talking about the one next week. I believe normally they're on the 2nd Thursday, but I think because of the way school started,
Right.
they moved it to the 3rd.
Okay.
So
Well, I'm glad you said the word council because that reminded me we would postpone a conversation until this item and then I didn't talk about it. And that would be city council.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So Superintendent Thiele, would you like to?
Yeah, I know I made a reference to it, but the city of Issaquah, city manager and I have had some conversations back and forth. And I know that Director Moraldo has had a conversation with the council president, and they are planning a study session on Tuesday, September 15th at 6:30 to discuss our Providence Heights project, high school 4, elementary 17. As it's been explained to me, they would like, they just kind of want to review where we're at in this. They want to review the site plan, any mitigation changes that have happened since they last laid eyes on it, I guess, you know, in our ongoing conversations with the neighbors and as the plan has, as we've gotten the plan ready for submittal. And the plan is ready for submittal at this time. We've agreed to not submit until this meeting happens so that the conversation can be a more robust conversation, because as you know, they would be in a quasi-judicial state once the plan is submitted. And so it's my understanding that they are inviting some of our capital project staff to kind of participate in their meeting so that we have kind of the experts there, if you will. And then there would be an opportunity for public input as well. I think it would be important for the council to hear from some of our school board members or potentially myself as well. Just a reminder of the importance of the project, all the challenges the project has faced, all the challenges that we face as a school district to build schools inside the UGA. And so that's kind of, so it's on my calendar, and I would just encourage us to participate in that. Is that about right, President Moraldo? Did I cover that?
Yes. So that's pretty much it. So I'm working with the superintendent to we've been offered an opportunity to provide our experts at the table during their study session, which I really appreciate. And that is really the work of the superintendent to ensure that we're providing support for answers, because I'm sure whatever the city has, that the council has questions of, I am more confident that our team understands our plan better than the city that's receiving it. We know all the intricacies, so I'm appreciative of that. I may have the opportunity to be included on that, to be able to at least have the voice of the board be elected to that. So we talked through some of that. I've had a few conversations. I've talked with President Hunt. I've also talked to Councilmember Martz, just letting them know. I think that Ann has had a conversation with Councilmember DeMichelle. So because we're postponing putting that plan in so that the council can have their conversation during their study session, I think that if you have any relationships, to really have those conversations. So Director Mullins sent out some key points that we are addressing with the council. For me, the one that is newest to me for information, and I don't think that the council is aware of, is the FAR, the floor area ratio. We're trying to get some clarity around what that is, but essentially we can't seem to get to the minimum floor area ratio to the size of the lot that is within their code. However, I keep wanting to say compact schools, but their school siting that they have, their newest code for that allows for a waiver of the FAR. And so
Up to 50% of the waiver.
50% waiver. And if they did that, then we'd be able to meet the minimum floor area requirements under that waiver. So this is the first time that the FAR and the, what's the word? It's not compact schools. Or is it compact schools?
Yeah. Compact schools.
Okay,
Compact
so it is
schools,
compact. Maybe that's why I keep thinking it. So this is the first time that those two marry together. Well, that and the middle school 6. With middle school 6, we've had no problem coming up with the floor area ratio. It's a taller building on a.
No, we actually, to be clear, President Moraldo, we did have an issue. The way we resolved it was by taking a piece of the land, subdividing it, and it's got the trail through it, so it became like park space, so it was counted differently. So that's how we got around the FAR on that site. So again, within their code is the capacity for staff to grant the waiver. Just to give the board a sense of what we're talking about, you're planning a 200,000 square foot high school. In order for us to meet the FAR ratio, as I think it's 0.75, we'd have to build over 600,000 square feet on the site. That would be the size of the new Costco facility.
So this is a thing where we're not building enough building on the site?
Yes.
Which is sort of contrary to all the public input we're getting that we're building too much on the site. So I'm very confused.
Yes.
Exactly. So really we need to triple the size of the high school.
Oh God.
And it can't just go up. You actually have to spread it out as well. To be fair to the city, I actually think that, you know, when they were contemplating, if you recall back, we were talking about the site up in the Highlands, and, you know, we were working, I think in their mind, they were thinking more like their comprehensive downtown plan, density, and maybe didn't contemplate, we still had this 140-acre site left inside the city in the district. Really the only logical site for a fourth comprehensive high school for our district. And so I think it's just that. Again, they put the ability to offer a waiver in the code, so they must have contemplated something like this. I guess my question would be, why did you put it in there then? If so.
And then why did you put it in and then not allow us to use it?
Yeah, and I'm not even sure how far we are down that road in that discussion. I know there's been a ton of discussion about it. It is, and in fairness to everybody, it is a very complex formula that you know, even for the engineers and the architects to understand. But it is an issue. We'd like to get it resolved for sure. I'd like the city council to understand, and I just think we need to keep driving home the point of, you know, we've done a significant amount of mitigation on this site plan that well exceeds code. Everything in it, except for the FAR that President Moraldo just spoke to, exceeds code requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So, reiterate date and time. I just want to make sure I have it right.
Tuesday, September 15th at 6:30, Director Moore.
And when you go to their website, you'll want to look under study sessions rather than it's council meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't think the agenda is out yet, Director Moore, on that. I think they're required to have it out by tomorrow sometime.
Yeah.
Right. And so then, and they are accepting public input during it.
They do during their study sessions.
Yep.
Just as the city of Sammamish, which is why I pushed in public input to their meeting earlier this week, even though it had nothing to do with the 3 projects their study session was about. I just wanted to make sure that they knew I got that we had received their letter, and that there were some aspects of their letter that I thought were factually incorrect.
Yeah.
And wanted, just an opportunity to start engaging more with the city of Sammamish as well.
And I think that's the other linkage that I don't know when we would have the schedule to do it, but I would love to do it before the end of the calendar year, is to have a linkage. I think I recognize one, maybe two names of the city council members, and we have yet to meet the new city manager. So there's been a lot of change, and not having relationships makes a difference. I mean, I think being able to have a relationship with President Hunt and Councilmember Martz and Councilmember DeMichelle and Councilmember Hall, and just, and I know Director Mullings has a wonderful relationship with Councilmember Goodman and et cetera. I think that's important. And so when we make our phone calls, they know who we are and kind of why we're calling.
Well, and the city of Sammamish was puzzling to me because they seem to have had this conversation at two different meetings and never reached out to anybody in the district that we know of to actually address some of their concerns. So
that's true. I'm not going to lay that at them though, Director Weaver. I should be watching. I should have been paying closer attention to their city council agendas. You're right. We were not aware, and we were having meetings staff to staff. It would have been nice to know, but as Director Moraldo pointed out, I think, they had a big turnover at the November election. And then, here came COVID in early March. Yeah. And they also had, I think they went through 3 different city managers last year. So there's been some change, and I apologize. It just was not on my radar screen to be polling their agendas and seeing what the agenda items were. We did not know they were going to talk about our project. They had staff to staff had been talking, excuse me, but it was mostly about frontage, because that's really the only thing that the city of Sammamish, has a stake in this particular project, because this project isn't in the city of Sammamish, it's in the city of Issaquah. We have appreciated the collaboration in the past with the city. And as I said in my letter to them, we are happy to re-engage. I agree with President Moraldo. I think it's time. I'd like to get a linkage meeting scheduled. We need to get to know one another again. I mean, we still know some of their council, but there's been a lot of change up there. I will admit to that.
And I mean, I met a few of them in the election process, but it's like a, hi, how are you? And that's all I know. So I agree. I think a linkage would be really good. And I think the sooner the better.
Yeah. I'm also glad that we kind of talked about the fact that, and I'll get to you in a second, but if I don't say this, I'll forget it. But, with Superintendent Thiele, just the not connected with the council agenda, I think part of that is not having that strategic communication person that would be looking at those relationships and how do we best communicate and keep interactive, because we're still looking for that position, which then reminded me that you're looking for 2 people. I kind of want to sneak in and be one of them, but if there's 2 of you that are like passionate, like, no, I want to be a part of that committee interviewing team, kind of sidestepping. Normally we have 1 employee, and so we only interview that 1 employee, but seeing how our communications director really helps us as a board and is kind of our communication person, I think it's appropriate for us to be involved in that discussion of what are those qualifications, what do they look like. So I don't know, I think Lisa's still on, Assistant Superintendent Heckman, if you want to share, if we want to have a conversation around that.
I think she may have dropped. Oh, no, there she is.
Oh, do I have to permit you? There, I'll ask you to unmute.
We can certainly, we do want 2 candidates just because, as you have said, that this particular position works so closely in trying to communicate the district mission as well as board efforts. And so thought it was important to have you be part and participate as part of the interview process. We would need to get you trained in our process. That's why I need to know who wants to participate so that we could set that up and have human resources take care of that for you and have you be ready to go. We are looking, I sent some information to Superintendent Thiele this evening, and we are looking to have that particular hire done and have the person working if we can meet all of the guidelines and parameters by October 26th.
Okay.
And I just noticed that you had asked us for information by today.
I know.
Which I forgot about. Can I get it to you by tomorrow?
You certainly can. Director Mullings has given me some terrific information that I have incorporated. How about this? What I can do is I rewrote the job description and have provided that to Superintendent Thiele. If he would like to forward that to you, you can see if there's anything that you absolutely feel like you need that was missed or that you need to point out. And if so, happy to incorporate that and push that forward into the description.
Okay, and otherwise you feel like you're pretty good to go.
Well, of course,
that sounds like
because I wrote it, so of course I can. But I have taken the input that I believe you have shared with Superintendent Thiele previously. I've talked with principals. I've talked with other cabinet peers, and again, Director Mullings was able to get me her perspective. So I do think
being first, I just am really happy about that.
In taking a look at what similar job descriptions are, et cetera, yes, I am confident in what it is that I have provided, but certainly happy to have you review it. And if you feel that there's something else we need to add, we can incorporate that.
It's in everybody's inbox now.
Okay, and I apologize for missing the date. I just missed the date.
We have all been incredibly busy. I understand.
Well, if I know Sydney's already given you input, she's smart and on the ball, so I might defer to her.
I know.
She knows what it is we're looking for, and she's familiar with that kind of position in her organization. So that's why I say that she's well experienced, and so I'm pretty confident in that. And you were going to say something.
No, I'll come back to that because I still had one more question about the city of Issaquah. But to finish this, you're still looking for somebody else to interview. Maybe Sydney should do it or to help with interviewing.
Would love that.
Oh, I'm happy to do that. And it is a function I own in my day job.
Well, that's great.
And have a lot of perspective. I should probably share it constructively in the interview loop, right? So sure.
Okay. So I guess, is everyone okay with that? That it's Sydney and myself?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay. I have
Anne.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Back to the city of Issaquah. I wanted to be clear. So we have our plan ready to be submitted, and we're waiting to submit our plan because now the Issaquah City Council wants to have this study session.
Correct.
Yes.
We have a study session on Tuesday. What is now the plan then to submit our proposal?
No later than Friday is what I told Victoria.
Okay.
And that was a no later. And if it comes up Tuesday night and we don't hear any questions from them, that's raising red flags for us to be able to say, okay, if that's still a concern, is there some way we can mitigate it? Then I feel we should submit it as soon as we can after that.
We're ready.
So that was, and so I do appreciate staff has been very patient with me because I went ahead and negotiated that we would not submit that. I talked with Victoria about that, and I really felt that it was goodwill on our part to say, let them have their more informal, I mean, still formal, right? Everything they do is in the public eye, just like us, so they don't have side conversations, but to be able to do it where they're not having to make a determination. So I would like to know prior to them taking a vote, what their concerns are. Rather than hoping that they make a vote and then they have something that creates a wall and too many questions and they don't want to move forward. So I think if we were to submit the plan today and they still had all those unanswered questions, we won't be getting our answer anytime sooner than allowing them the opportunity to have their conversation the way they want to be able to have it in their study session. So that was my call. I hope you guys are okay with it. If not, you can get mad at me, but I already made the decision.
No, I'm okay with it. I just don't want there to be a continual dragging out of our submitting this plan, because originally the hopes were to submit this plan months ago. And I realized lots of things have happened in the middle of all of this. But it's been known for a very long time that we were on the verge or getting close to putting this plan in. And then to again have another delay when the city of Issaquah has known this is coming.
Right.
Okay, we're going to delay so they can have their study session. That's great, but then no more delays.
Right, right. And Superintendent Thiele, correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't our submitting the plan also come with the fees associated with it?
Oh, that's a good question, President Moraldo. I don't know the answer to that, if we pay the fees, right up front, or how that works.
I would assume
Probably.
The sooner we get it in, the sooner they get their
Probably.
money. I think they might be able to use it.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so our calendaring, you guys know about. Then on the 15th, Anne.
No, go finish that, because I just remembered one more thing. Are you and Harlan not going to be at the beginning of our next meeting?
So we have our Wasda board meeting is from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. So we would not be able to do any type of work study with you. And so I would assume that at this point, that would mean we likely will not have a work study. In case our board meeting runs long, although Brenda's been pretty good about it, and we've postponed the evaluation of the executive director. So we should be able to make it by 6. If not, if I'm not actually on the call by 6 p.m., I'd like to designate the past president to run the meeting. Normally it would fall to our legislative rep, but since he would be late if I was late. And then there would at least be that would be Ann.
That's Suzanne. Okay.
I think that's me.
That's Ann. Okay.
I think Suzanne is the past.
Passed.
Yeah, no, it's Ann.
Okay.
2 times passed.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for reminding me of that part, so we can publicly say we're still having our meeting. It will start at 6. It's just Harlan and I may or may not be there at the beginning. So any action, we'll try to take a look at the agenda as Harlan and I build it. And Harlan, I don't know if this is a good time to schedule when you and I can meet with the superintendent next week.
We already scheduled that.
Oh, we did. That's right. We were on the ball.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
I couldn't get unmuted because you guys had muted me, when I relogged on to my phone. But I wanted to reiterate what Director Moore said. No more delays.
No more delays. Nope.
So I don't care what they say and what they talk about at their study session. It is really irrelevant. That thing needs to be submitted.
Yeah. I would agree. Okay, so.
Okay, Marnie, just one last quick thing, because there was a correction in the little chat window. Apparently the PTSA council meeting is not next Thursday, it's the 24th. So, but Diane said she'd send out the list when she gets it from Aaron, so we're fine.
Okay. It's on the 24th?
That's what Laurel said.
Okay.
She sent us a chat.
I
or maybe she just sent it to me. Maybe she just sent it to me. She did.
Yeah, probably got it as a private chat.
Yeah, my mistake. I'm not good at this whole Zoom chat room thing. But anyway, so I had the date wrong, not surprising. We'll get the date from the person who actually knows what the dates are.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Marnie, I would just say I'm really sorry to anybody on the board or in the public who was subjected to some of the vulgarity that we heard in the Zoom bomb. Sorry that happened. Wish there was a way we could make it not happen. Thank you, Stephen, for quick action to get our meeting cleaned up for us. Appreciate it.
I think in the past, we have had everyone comes in muted and video off, or we control it. So, and that we control making sure no one can share the screen. So we'll just make sure that that happens each and every time.
I don't know how I forgot it was the first week of school, and that was we had a really good run. I was really proud of everyone out there that kept everything clean and happy. And I'm sorry, everything will be locked down in the future. I'd like to have an offline conversation about some other security restrictions, if that's okay.
Yeah. And it just may be that if we continue to have issues and we can't address them, I think we are within the guidelines to do like a kind of what we did for the community meeting, which was we're together in the room and then everyone else can watch on our YouTube channel.
Yep.
And I don't have a problem.
Have to take public input verbally. You can just take it in writing. Many school districts, that's all they've been doing since COVID.
Yep. So we have afforded a privilege to our community because we really respect hearing their perspective. I did not appreciate hearing the perspective of the person that decided to say some really inappropriate things that I think, you know, a segment of our society that chooses to do that. But I do appreciate that we were able to finish our meeting and anything else. So now for the good of the order, I'm only 55 minutes late. Again, if you thought we were going to be done by 8:30, I don't know. You haven't